From the Randy Moss trade to the Patriots, to the unforgettable Herschel Walker trade, here are the most impactful trades in NFL history. To start off, I've got the Raiders-Patriots deal involving Randy Moss, who joined the Raiders from the Minnesota Vikings back in 2005. An absolute joy to watch for the Vikings, Moss unfortunately couldn't translate that level in Oakland. It wasn't long before his poor performances cast a huge shadow on his capabilities, and many people started questioning whether his prime had already ended. Now, the Raiders were super disappointed and knew that the wide receiver wanted to leave the franchise. And it wasn't long before Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots came knocking during the 2007 NFL Draft. The Patriots had just suffered a brutal loss in the AFC Championship to none other than Peyton Manning. This led to perhaps one of the greatest trades of all time, and honestly, it's not an exaggeration. The risk was huge, but the Patriots decided to go for it, and their fans will tell you just how much it paid off. Moss immediately reignited his career, earning himself the Comeback Player of the Year award after setting the record for 23 receiving touchdowns, a record that still stands today. He'd go on to form a wonderful partnership with Tom Brady, having 3 1,000-plus yard seasons in a row, while catching 47 touchdowns in those 3 years. Meanwhile, the Raiders were left thinking about what could have been, something that the next team on the list also experienced after trading Eric Dickerson. Now, Dickerson was the best running back in the league in 1987, undisputedly. However, the Rams were being stingy with the contract offer they put out. And just like that, the course of NFL history was once again changed because Dickerson demanded a trade. And of course, he got what he wanted. Every team wanted a piece of him back then. But it took 3 teams to make it happen. The Colts would trade their linebacker Cornelius Bennett to the Bills for a first-round pick in the following year, in addition to a first- and second-round pick for the '89 season and Greg Bell. The running back Bell was immediately moved on along with those 3 draft picks and another 3 picks. Oh, and also another running back in Owen Gill to the Rams. All this for Dickerson. But it proved to be a win-win trade, because the Rams got themselves a lovely little deal too. Still though, the way Eric performed for the first 3 years of his Colts career was truly special. He rushed for almost 4,000 yards in under 3 seasons in Indianapolis, while also becoming the fastest running back to ever reach 10,000 rushing yards. His impact on the league will always be remembered, as Dickerson remains one of the greatest running backs to ever play the game. At least the Rams got a good deal in return, because that's not normal in the NFL. Take for example the Steve Largent trade. Oh, what a mess. The Oilers had struck gold when they drafted Largent, but they were impatient and they didn't even give him a game to prove himself because they believed he was too short. Famous last words, huh? They would trade the wide receiver to the then Washington Seahawks. But the Oilers' loss was the Seahawks' gain, because Largent would go on to become Mr. Seahawk. Playing 14 seasons for the franchise, Largent rushed for over 13,000 yards, catching 819 passes along with exactly 100 touchdowns. Oh, and do you know who the Seahawks traded in return for Largent? A meager 8th-round pick. It remains one of the greatest trade steals of all time in American sports, because a 7-time Pro Bowl selection and a Pro Football Hall of Fame inductee costs nothing but an 8th-round pick. Outrageous. However, for the next entry on the list, I return to fellow trading partners the Colts and the Rams, who came together to trade another legend, Marshall Faulk. These 2 franchises have something of a unique history trading Hall of Fame running backs among themselves. And this time, it was the Colts who repaid the favor for the Eric Dickerson move. Marshall Faulk had been a superstar for the Colts, spending 5 great years with the franchise before stalling on a new contract because he wanted more money. In fact, the situation got out of hand because Faulk was even missing practices at one point. And Bill Polian didn't want any of that negativity to harm his team's chemistry, so he got on the phone and traded him to the Rams. Unlike most of the other trades on this list, the Colts got themselves a decent return. That's because they got a 2nd and 5th-round pick in exchange, which they used to draft Edgerrin James, a future Hall of Famer too. But it still somewhat paled in comparison to the impact that Faulk had with the Rams. He became part of the greatest show on turf alongside superstars Kurt Warner and wide receivers Torrey Holt and Isaac Bruce. It was honestly a sight to behold. That group won the Super Bowl, with Faulk winning MVP honors after a sensational season. That said, as good a trade as it was, it doesn't scrape the top 3. Because how can I possibly overlook the Atlanta Falcons making a hash of the Brett Favre situation? Sure, Favre struggled big time during his stay in Atlanta, but I genuinely believe that he should have been given more time to prove himself. He was an insane talent, and despite landing with the Falcons after the draft, Favre's Hall of Fame career unfolded elsewhere, with the Green Bay Packers instead. Now, the fans are to blame for this too, because he got a negative reception after his first pass was intercepted and was returned for a touchdown. But come on, everyone makes mistakes. Either way, the Falcons traded him in exchange for a 1992 first-round draft pick, which ended up being a steal for the Packers. Favre quickly turned his career around for the Bays, helping them return to NFL glory. And they won the Super Bowl over the Patriots and almost won another one too. They fell at the final hurdle to the next entry on the list, John Elway. His trade to the Broncos is an insane story. Elway's camp had told the Colts that he did not want to play for them before the 1983 NFL Draft. Either way, they had the first pick, and they used it on the quarterback. But the future Hall of Famer simply refused to play. It was utterly bizarre, and the Colts had no other option but to trade him to the Broncos. In return, the Colts received Chris Hinton, Mark Herman, and a first-round pick for the following year's draft. But if only Elway had stayed. That's because he proved his #1 pick potential, going on to appear in 5 Super Bowls and is considered a top 5 quarterback in NFL history. But his impact on the Broncos has been way bigger than what he produced on the field, and he's also an integral part of the franchise in the front office. And you really do feel for the Colts, because it easily could have been them instead. Because this trade impacted the Colts in a big way, leading them to leave Baltimore for Indianapolis, reshaping the league forever. However, as impactful as that was, there can't be a more lopsided and effective trade than the next one, the Herschel Walker trade. Now remember, Herschel Walker wasn't exactly a bad player. He set the league on fire during his time with the Cowboys, and you can understand the Minnesota Vikings and their thinking. They believed that Walker was the one piece they lacked to win the Super Bowl. Now, this thought process would lead the Vikings to give up the largest single-player haul in NFL history. It included 2 first-round picks, 3 second-round picks, and a third-round pick, all for this one player. The deal was finalized after intense negotiations, only for the Vikings to find out that Walker was not the final piece of the puzzle. He left the franchise after only 2 seasons. On the other hand, though, the Cowboys were in dreamland. They used that enormous haul to build a roster that would go on to dominate the NFL for many years, winning 3 Super Bowls in 4 seasons in the 90s. Insanity! So, from this Walker monstrosity to the Randy Moss trade, these were the most impactful trades in NFL history.